Hey folks, we are back. Apologies for the delay in getting this next classic Doctor Who review out. Aside from the modern series taking up a lot of my time over the past several months, I do actually have a full-time job that I have to balance with this channel. Now, what kind of a job could a man trapped in the far fringes of space possibly have? Well, the fact of the matter is I do actually have a boss of some sorts, and I do need to put in the hours in order to maintain my existence. Maybe it's easier if I just show you. This large, mysterious vortex just appeared in space one day, and now I work for it. I think it's a black hole of some sort, except it's white instead of black, so I call it the white hole. The white hole doesn't ask much of me, only that I stare directly into the heart of it for exactly 8 hours a day, with a 30-minute lunch break in between. Bathroom breaks are also permitted, but frowned upon, so I usually just hold that to the end of the day. I know it doesn't seem like much work, but it really does a number on my knees and back. I've asked if I could use my chair, but the white hole claims that would cause too many logistical issues, so I don't bother to bring that up anymore. All the white hole wants is for me to remain perfectly still while it draws from my mind. Whatever that means. Honestly, I just go into daydream mode while it's happening. Thinking about Doctor Who mostly. I guess whatever it's getting from me is valuable enough, however, because it does pay me on a regular basis. I receive payment in the form of Uncle ZX473's Grade C nutrient slurry for organics, which I need in order to survive out here. I stare at the white hole, and then during meal breaks, I go to the kitchen area to eat, and voila! There's a fresh can of nutrient slurry just sitting there on the counter, waiting for me. I try to pretty it up a bit, but it's hard to do too much when you have no other ingredients to work with. I get to go on living, and it gets something. So I guess it's a fair trade. It's actually not that different from a lot of jobs I've had in the past. Or at least, I have the feeling it's not that different, because I have absolutely no memory of my past life. Anyways, enough about that. It's time to move on with the Sontaran Experiment Classic Review. As a matter of fact, this is the first story that introduced me to Doctor Who. Back in the day, Doctor Who would play on repeat in America on public broadcasting stations in the late 80s to the early 90s. For me personally, that station was WTTW Chicago, Channel 11.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey. I'm a subscriber to Channel 11, WTTW in Chicago.
So one night, after my parents had just wrapped up the latest episode of Upstairs Downstairs, they decided to stay up and check out this weird old British sci-fi show they'd heard about. I stayed up with them. I was 8 years old. Little did I know that my world was about to fundamentally change forever.
This is 11, WTTW, the Chicago television home of the redoubtable Time Lord, Doctor Who.
I'll do my best to give this an honest, clear-eyed review, free of the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia. However, nostalgia is a hell of a drug, so forgive me if I wax poetic on occasion. But before we go any further, please remember to like and subscribe. No worries, no rush, I'll just sit here quietly and give you time to find the button. Okay, cool. You found it? You good? Okay, cool. Well then let's get into it. Unlike the vast majority of classic Doctor Who, this story is only 2 parts long, rather than the mostly standard 4-part episode arcs. It was the first 2-parter story since the classic William Hartnell story, The Rescue. The first to be shot on location since John Pertwee's opening story, Spearhead from Space, and the first on-location story to be shot entirely on videotape instead of 16mm film, due to advances in camera technology that allowed the crew to use much smaller and more transportable cameras. They did this after a bit of reshuffling of the initially planned trilogy of 6-parters meant to cap off the season, allowing the production to use the same crew for both this story and the 4-parter The Ark in Space. This was the second story Tom Baker and company filmed after having wrapped on Robot a few months earlier. The story's total runtime is more akin to a modern episode of Doctor Who. However, it still maintains the slower pace of the older series, meaning that this story is fairly simple and stripped down, without a ton of events, as opposed to the jam-packed stories of the modern era. Basically, episode 1 is all setup, episode 2 is all payoff. The first part does a great job of building an aura of tension and dread, as it follows our 3 companions across an eerie, desolate landscape of post-humanity Earth. There are lots of quick cuts to a figure just dipping out of sight on a hilltop, or some rocks tumbling off the edge of a cliff, as if something was just there. The soundtrack does a really good job of heightening the otherworldly eeriness of the situation. I'll always remember this random shot of Harry looking up and seeing just an empty hill, with that spacey synth sting hitting with the cut. It just makes him instantly feel alone, isolated, and in danger. This dissonant piano sting for the Sontaran Epcot ship reveal is another nice musical moment. The first episode does a great job building an air of mystery around what is happening and who could possibly be behind it. Unfortunately, in classic Doctor Who tradition, they renamed the story from The Destructors to The Sontaran Experiment, ruining the surprise reveal and only cliffhanger in the story, much to the disappointment of the writers. So the next time you get disappointed by a major reveal being spoiled by the production themselves, just remember, it's a Doctor Who tradition. I will say that as an adult watching this with fresh eyes, and with the knowledge of the highs this show is capable of, even within just other episodes of this season, I do recognize more flaws than my starry-eyed 8-year-old counterpart may have noticed. For example, the Doctor is uncharacteristically flippant about Sarah and Harry's safety when they materialize via transmat. Harry disappears and appears multiple times, and even claims he feels slightly scrambled, and the Doctor responds with a facetious joke. He then proceeds to get to work without even seeming to remember that Sarah exists, needing Harry to prompt him, and also shows zero concern when they hear her crying for help.
Doctor?
Yes?
I can see you're busy, but what about Sarah?
Sarah? That sounds like Sarah.
Sarah somehow materializes in a way that makes her fall over and hurt her butt, cartoonishly flailing her legs in the air and requiring Harry to help her stand up for some reason. They also have the classic old thing exchange that becomes a running gag between the two of them for the short time they're on the show together.
Okay, old thing.
Harry, I'm not a thing.
It's somewhat charming in a dated sort of way, but definitely not the heights of relationship building. Unfortunately, as much as I love this TARDIS team, and Sarah and Harry together, I feel like the relationship never evolves much beyond this bickering sibling dynamic. I'm not saying I wanted a full-blown romance, but more of a deepening of their friendship would have been nice. An interesting and relatively unique element of this story is its interconnectedness with the stories that comes before and after it. Unlike most seasons of classic Who, which have the Doctor and companion arrive in the TARDIS, have a standalone adventure, and then leave, this season features stories that bleed into and affect one another, with the Doctor's whole reason for being there having to do with repairing the transmat beam for the people of Nerva Beacon from the previous story. They depart at the end via transmat only to be scooped up by the Time Lords to the next story, and then finally arrive back on Nerva Beacon in the finale of the season. The interconnected nature of Tom Baker's first season gives it a feeling of being on an epic journey across time and space that you're getting to see the entirety of, each story feeding off of the next one and progressing the relationships of the main TARDIS crew organically, as opposed to many seasons, especially the modern ones, where it feels more like you're getting occasional windows into the lives of these characters, but there are tons of adventures in between episodes that we just never get to see.
Great work, guys. And sorry again. I did not know it was their mating season.
I like this approach of having light connective tissue between essentially standalone episodes, as it contributes to the more grounded feeling the show was going for at this time, with a more apparent cause and effect of events in the story. It just makes it feel like one big epic adventure rather than a string of isolated events. The Doctor tells Sarah and Harry to push off while he's working, so they go looking for Trafalgar Square. Sarah acts as if she's actually half convinced they'll find it, which seemed like very odd characterization for Sarah. She's written a bit more like a naive young girl than the quick-witted adult journalist we've seen in previous stories. That includes the story that this is a sequel to, The Time Warrior, the first Sontaran and first Sarah Jane Smith story. I know that Sarah is often used as the damsel in distress, and this story is no exception, but I feel like other stories write her with a bit more self-assured adult confidence and feistiness than what's on display here. She does rescue the doctor and find the sonic screwdriver, so at least there's that. Her horrified reactions to the reveal of the Sontaran and subsequent murder of Roth is also a standout moment for her, delivering her terror and moral revulsion of the Potato Head authentically.
Why did you make that disagreeable noise?
Who killed him?
That is my function. I am a warrior.
Murderer! Murderer!
Silence!
Harry is sprinkled in throughout this story and does have one genuinely touching scene where he cares for the prisoner as best he can, displaying his duty of care and good bedside manner.
Look here, old chap, I'm going to have to go and get help. You understand?
Aside from that, however, he mainly just falls down a hole and takes the equipment out of the Sontaran ship. The 2-episode format just doesn't give the 3-person TARDIS team much time to give them all good material, and Harry draws the short straw once again, unfortunately. The guest cast are all fine for the most part. The 3 stranded soldiers are pretty run-of-the-mill space guys. Their performances are fine, but sparse. The actor playing Roth gives an interesting and memorable performance as a twitchy, half-demented survivor of Styre's experiments.
Tell me about the machine. Why are you so frightened of it?
The machine serves him, captures my crewmate.
Who serves who?
The thing in the rocks. I'll not get caught. No, not again.
The prisoner Harry helps evokes genuine sympathy, while also looking an awful lot like Jesus, possibly intentional.
The Sontaran put you here. What for? Do you know why?
To die.
One thing I did notice is that they all roll their R's. 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 I can't do it. I can't do it.
He's been to the rocks. I saw. The rope's hooked.
Right. How long have they been in deep freeze on Nerva?
This is apparently because the writers wanted them to all have South African accents, as an indication of a dialect shift that must have occurred over the years amongst the isolated colony they herald from. As for Field Major Styre, the Sontaran himself, Kevin Lindsay reprises the role he originated in the first Sontaran story, The Time Warrior, this time playing Styre though, rather than the very dead Lynx. He does a quality job here of building off of the persona he crafted in his previous outing. With his raspy voice, analytical no-nonsense attitude, complete lack of emotional intelligence, and occasional snake-like hisses of excitement, he definitively commits fully to the role.
I am Styre. Field Major Styre, as you would address me.
I would go so far as to declare that his take on the character to be the definitive template for how all actors following him have played the Sontarans, similar to how Michael Wishry defined the Davros performance. The Sontarans were created by MVP Robert Holmes, who wrote the first Sontaran story in the previous season, The Time Warrior. He was excited about the new monster he created and wrote a copious amount of notes for the writers of the story to follow about their race, including their mating habits, much to the appreciation and bemusement of Bob Baker and Dave Martin. The Sontarans are a clone race, mass-bred for war, so they all look alike, as Sarah points out, having witnessed the original Sontaran. Unfortunately, the costume design for this new Sontaran is significantly different, and even a bit off-model, from the first appearance of the race. Not only is the skin color and facial features completely different, but this Sontaran has 5 fingers instead of the traditional 3. The old Sontaran looked like a potato with sort of a flat, weaselly face, while this Sontaran looks more like a boiled egg, or the Man in the Moon. Regardless, outside of those inconsistencies, this costume actually looks pretty cool, and honestly a bit less silly than the prior design, or even most of the future Sontaran designs in the classic series. The way they incorporated the real elements of his face with the mask is pretty well done for 1974 on a shoestring budget. The way his mouth hinges one-to-one with his real mouth movements, and the occasional creepy, tongue licks he does, sells the authenticity of this alien, better than the previous attempt in my opinion. Apparently the mask had to be swapped out, due to both the deterioration of the prop and Kevin Lindsay being in poor health and having breathing issues, having apparently secretly suffered greatly in the costume during the filming of The Time Warrior. This new mask was much more lightweight and breathable. The swap is completely understandable, but regardless, Sarah's dialogue in this section feels a little odd. since she specifically calls out that he looks the same and even confuses him for links when he's clearly different.
But you're identical. Same ugly.
Identical, yes. The same, no.
On the other hand, I suppose he's only the second Sontaran she's ever seen, and his giant potato head and uniform probably looks similar enough to Sarah's eyes. Still, it would have been cooler if they did use the same costume for both stories. Nitpicking, I know, but what's the point of making a review of a 50-year-old episode of television if not to nitpick? Hilariously, this costume inconsistency would reoccur throughout the rest of the entire classic series, with the Sontarans looking radically different every time they reappeared. So for a clone race, their appearance seems to shift an awful lot. Maybe they have different clone batches spread across the galaxy using different mixes of herbs and spices, I don't know. As I said, the story is fairly light, but it does effectively draw you in with the mysteries of the first half, slowly showing more and more clues before the big reveal at the very end of part 1. The atmosphere is eerie and empty, full of wide open fields and craggy rocks looming overhead, creating a sense of lonely unease. Claustrophobia and tight spaces are a great way to evoke fear, but anyone who's ever played an open-world RPG can attest to the paranoia induced from walking out into a wide open space with no cover. In such an environment, an enemy could come at you from any direction. Without a place to hide, there's nothing you can do but either stand your ground or run. Both methods proved to be ineffective in this story. This story was filmed on location in a place called Dartmoor, which the director Rodney Bennett had actually grown up near and was familiar with. His familiarity with the area helped him to expertly utilize the sense of empty isolation that such an environment elicits to maximum effect. The episode makes the absolute most out of shooting in yet another desolate outdoor location. Not quite a quarry this time, but quarry-adjacent empty fields. Harry's discovery of the chained, dehydrated man is especially chilling, and leans into this new era of Who's attempt to make things feel more grounded and gritty. Another example of this darker edge include the Doctor discovering the dead man with his neck broken, and Roth revealing the horrible burn marks in his arm from being tortured. These moments make the otherwise laughable-looking Eggman feel like a real threat, and cast the Sontarans in the most sinister and mature light I think we ever see this villainous race, before they decay into farcical punching bags in later stories.
Chocolate!
Showing just one Sontaran conducting ghastly, torturous experiments on a small group of humans is far more disturbing and threatening than the spectacle of a fleet of CGI Epcot centers blowing up another fleet of CGI spaceships could ever evoke. The writers were apparently inspired by the real-life ghastly experiments that Nazi scientists like the execrable Joseph Mengele conducted on prisoners during the Holocaust. This was not the last time the overtly humanistic, anti-fascist Doctor Who would use the Nazis as a template for their villains, and not even the most prominent use of them in this season. This stands in stark contrast to even the darkest of modern Who episodes, which rely on energy beams, instant disintegration, or other bloodless supernatural methods to off their characters. The showing of blood and wounds, and the very realistic causes of death for the characters of this era of Who make it a decidedly more gritty affair, with more palpable stakes and consequences. This is the flavor of Doctor Who I like the most, and it's unfortunately eluded the modern series outside of individual episodes and some sections of the darker, more mature Capaldi era. Sarah's big moment in the episode is when she's captured by Styre. First, he roughly appraises her by pushing her face around as if she were livestock rather than a person. His constant references to her as a female and comments on her worth as a warrior and general interest in her is creepy right off the bat. He then puts a big eyeball on her forehead and proceeds with an experiment in fear. This sequence is pretty well done, and uses creative camera work and a couple rubbery props to great effect. The way the camera slants and zooms in on the rocks above works surprisingly well when combined with quick cuts to Elizabeth Sladen's terrified face, jerking away in fear of being crushed. The rubber snake and oatmeal monster are also nice touches. Not real looking, but effectively surreal enough, given the imagination context, for me to buy it and still be drawn in. But what really sells the moment is Elizabeth Sladen's performance, trying her best to resist the illusions before being completely overcome with terror, screaming and thrashing helplessly. At this point in the series, Sladen had a full season under her belt and was a pro at delivering these sorts of mind-bending, overcome by horror moments that are required of a Doctor Who companion. Tom Baker is fun in this story, and you can feel him starting to really settle into his groove in this one.
All right. Now talk.
Certainly. What would you like me to talk about?
You wouldn't even know that he had been injured on set and was in fear of losing the role altogether during the shoot. There's only the telltale signs of Tom Baker standing a bit stiffer than usual in a lot of his scenes, especially in part 2, as well as the stuntman that I never noticed when I first watched it, but now that I know, I can't unsee him. Oh, that's right. I think it's time to dive into some backstory. Unfortunately, Tom Baker was injured on set during the shooting of the story, cracking his collarbone during a staged fall. He was rushed to a hospital and patched up, but there were concerns that Tom wouldn't be able to film the remainder of the episode, much less the season, if his injury was too severe. This was only the second story they had begun shooting for the series, and only Tom's 4th day on set. Tom worried that they may just up and replace him if he couldn't hack it. So Tom decided to use the most powerful tool at his disposal to secure his job: his charisma. After being released from the hospital with the news that it wasn't too bad of a break and would heal relatively soon, Tom made a beeline for the pub he and the crew would frequent after shoots, and showed up in a sling, with his joviality dialed up to 11. He swanned in, made a big show of being lively and full of energy, ordered a drink, and had a grand night out with the team, boosting everyone's spirits and squashing any lingering concerns that he couldn't nail the rest of the season. Whether or not this in fact secretly did the trick and secured his continued role in the show will never be known. But whatever the reason, we can all breathe a collective sigh of relief that the world was not unknowingly made immeasurably poor by the absence of 7 seasons of Tom Baker as Doctor Who. Another sad behind-the-scenes fact that deserves attention would be the state of Kevin Lindsay's health. The actor playing Styre was tragically suffering from a heart condition at this point in his life, and he was actually in a lot of pain during the shooting. Nevertheless, he was determined to put his all into this character and continue the role he had originated in the previous season. So he came on set regardless, gave it his all, and even did his own fight scenes, tussling with Tom Baker and his stunt double.
Afraid? A Sontaran afraid? All right, come to your death.
He died shortly after this performance, 6 months later, but it's nice to know that he went out swinging, pouring all of his love for the craft into this classic Doctor Who villain. He passed away 6 weeks after the broadcast of episode 2, making this his final television performance. So, hats off to Kevin Lindsay. You will never be forgotten, especially by us, the classic Doctor Who fans. On a lighter note, let's talk about the robot. I really like that it's a real honest-to-goodness robot. It's not a puppet or a CGI creation, but a machine that's made out of metal, has moving parts, and is able to trundle around, turn its head, raise and lower itself on its insect-like legs, and shoot claws out of its chest. It's a cool-looking design that feels alien and real. It reminds me a bit of the Imperial probe droids from The Empire Strikes Back, and I wonder if the creators of that robot took inspiration from this one from 6 years earlier. I wish they'd bring these back as service or hunter robots for the Sontarans to use in the modern series. Give them the Dalek treatment, where you make the machine feel more heavy-duty and realistic, but maintain the overall form and silhouette of the creature. As for the plot itself, it's pretty straightforward, without a ton of twists and turns. It's tightly written, with some great one-liners from Baker, but there really isn't much time to build up and then pay off the mystery. We see everyone being spied on by somebody, and at first you think it's the space soldiers, but they're quickly proven to just be victims as well when one of them gets chased off a cliff by the robot. The villain and his plans are discovered largely by the Doctor and company just wandering around the rocks and happening to stumble upon the villain's hideout in his spaceship. Once the villain is revealed, it's just a matter of finding out why he's doing what he's doing and putting a stop to it, all of which is done very quickly. I also just find it odd that an entire invasion fleet is sitting impatiently with their motors running, just waiting for this one guy to deliver this one report.
The entire invasion fleet is being held up. How much longer must we wait?
Surely they could easily kidnap dozens of humans from all over the galaxy and conduct multiple experiments in real labs. But instead they're all waiting on this one guy on this one planet conducting slapdash experiments outdoors. Talk about putting all your eggs in one basket. Styre asks why Sarah made a disagreeable noise, as if he has no concept of pain or fear. Even in other species, he's surely slaughtered at some point in the past. The way the Sontarans are portrayed in the story, while more seriously than in others, still leaves a lot to be desired in terms of plausibility when you really think about it. I get that they're trying to emphasize that he's an alien and he's learning about the humans, but I find it hard to believe that he has no knowledge at all of basic human expression. Especially since he's not only already been experimenting on and torturing them, but he has a spy camera to observe them interacting in the wild. A lot of his dialogue makes it seem as if he's from another plane of existence, where all the laws of reality are different, rather than an alien who has fought countless battles against countless species to inform him. I do like the mini arc that the human soldiers go on. Once they discover that Virl is a traitor, they are understandably disgusted. yet they still try their best to keep him from being crushed by the weight. Then when Vril is freed, he attacks the Sontaran to save the Doctor and dies for it, redeeming himself in his final moments and helping to save humanity. I like that in even such a compressed runtime, the story finds that thread of human perseverance and camaraderie to weave in. One major problem with this story is the ambiguous and confusing nature of the Sontaran's plan. The dialogue makes it seem at times as if they are testing humans before they invade and conquer Earth, which is declared to be completely uninhabited by humans at this point by basically every character in the story.
No one set foot here for thousands of years.
There's been no life on Earth, not of any size, for 10,000 years.
Nobody comes here, so there's no transmat system. Check.
I understood Earth wasn't inhabited.
Yes, that's what we thought.
There has been no intelligent life on this planet since the time of the solar flares.
So if you take it that way, then the story makes absolutely no sense. Why would they need to experiment on the humans when there are no humans to even deal with on the planet they're invading?
We shall destroy your planet.
The more logical plan, and the one I think I always assumed they meant when watching it, is that they are experimenting on humans on Earth because they plan to invade the entire galaxy that the humans have colonized, attacking them on multiple fronts. They set up the trap on Earth precisely because it is uninhabited and isolated. The perfect place to lure in and capture some humans, then set up shop without interference.
As we knew, the Earth has not been repopulated. I have therefore carried out my instructions and lured a group of humans to the planet for testing.
Read that way, I have no problem with the story's logic. However, much like a lot of dialogue in the story, it feels like something was lost in translation, or left too general, and could have used one more pass to tighten things up and make sure the Sontaran's plan is clearly communicated to avoid this confusion. I do like the Doctor's bluff, that the men Styre has been testing are the lowest form of human, and this has all been an intentional trap. And I like the fight to tire him out and the Doctor's trick to sabotage his ship. Jon Pertwee was a very physical, man-of-action type of Doctor, and it's good to see that fighting action hero side of the character maintained in its new incarnation. I spoke about this on a previous video, but the deflating head effect, while very silly looking by today's standards, really wowed me and burned its image into my 8-year-old brain for some reason. Maybe it's the nostalgia working on me, but I will always love and cherish this moment. However, the ultimate resolution to the problem leaves a lot to be desired. It just feels way too easy and implausible. The way the Doctor simply brushes off the Commander's threat to sweep across the galaxy and destroy humanity simply due to the lack of Styre's report is laughable.
We shall destroy your planet.
What? Without Styre's report?
Next time, Earthling, we shall utterly destroy you.
Not today, thank you.
Surely the Sontarans would send out more agents to investigate the validity of the Doctor's claims and very quickly discover that he was lying, then proceed to launch the invasion anyways. So it feels like the Doctor just papered over a very big problem that is going to explode a day or so after he's gone. I guess that's kind of par for the course of the Doctor as well, so, it's kind of in character, but, still a problem for the story, you know what I mean?
Brinkmanship, I think they call it.
And then they leave in the transmat at the end. The soldiers emphasize how dangerous and unpredictable these machines are, but the Doctor again simply laughs it off as he steps into the potential death trap with his friends. I don't know about you, but I would be very cautious about setting my foot into any of these teleportation beams sci-fi universes are abundant with. For all I know, it could be erasing my atoms and creating a perfect duplicate of me in the new place I wanted to go, unaware that the original version of me was murdered. Where the Doctor just cracks jokes as he phases in and out of existence. He must know something I don't. Overall, I enjoyed the story well enough, and I think it mostly holds up. It has a cool villain, eerie atmosphere, and some fun moments and one-liners. It's also the only other relatively good Sontaran story of the classic era. However, watching it as an adult with the nostalgia glasses somewhat removed, I'm able to recognize its shortcomings in characterization, its logical inconsistencies, and the ending feeling way too easy for such a big potential threat. It's a perfectly fine middle-of-the-season romp, sandwiched in between the awesome statement of purpose story that is The Ark in Space, and the epic all-time classic that is Genesis of the Daleks. It's a palate cleanser story between the two darkest entries in the season. A fun, fast watch that goes down easy. I give it a perfectly serviceable B-. Good, not great. However, despite its shortcomings, it will always have a special place in my heart. So that's it. That's the review. Coming up next, I'm going to continue moving forward with the Tom Baker era, tackling arguably the best and most well-known story of classic Doctor Who, Genesis of the Daleks. The best Doctor confronting the best villains, as well as the first appearance of the leader of those villains, himself becoming an instant classic villain? Sign me up. I'm also going to take a crack at reviewing the first episode of the modern series, the first Christopher Eccleston story, Rose, so keep an eye out for that. The history of Romana will be coming eventually as well, so if any of that sounds good to you or you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and until next time, Kay, signing out. All right. Another one in the can. Speaking of cans, it looks like it's time for dinner.